Welcome back to MPG. Today we're talking about stretching. I'm going to be telling you why it's important. And there's a lot of people who believe that the science is saying that it's not important or that it's detrimental or that it has no effect. But I'm going to explain why a lot of those studies are wrong and why stretching is actually very important, and take you through the reasons and the logic and the reasoning behind stretching. And hopefully by the end of this video you will agree with me that stretching is an important component of all training programs, and particularly for endurance athletes, and it's something that we need to be very cognizant of. Okay, so just to show you a basic understanding of how the body changes when you're in different positions. In the standing position, this is a very basic diagram of the joints and the muscles of the body. And if I just highlight one or two different muscle groups just to show you what happens when you, for example, in standing versus sitting, you can see what happens. So here we have the anterior compartment, sorry this pen doesn't work so well, and the posterior compartment. On the anterior you'd have your hip flexor, and in the posterior compartment you'd have your glute or your hip extensor. Now you can see in this image, or in this drawing, the muscles are pretty balanced. So anterior, posterior, there's a good ratio between front and back. Now if I go to a sitting position, you can see immediately this ratio changes. The posterior compartment now, that muscle is becoming very long, and the anterior component here, the hip flexor, has become very short. Now what happens over time is that if you stay in this position for extended periods throughout the day, as we all do, sitting in a car, sitting in front of the TV, at work, at a desk, the muscles change their lengths. This muscle becomes longer and weaker, and this muscle becomes shorter and stronger. And so the range of motion of what is normal for a human being changes at these points. So this is the first thing the first example of the type of thing that happens just through our activities of daily living. Now, when you take this person who's been sitting the whole day and you put them in this situation, the whole picture changes. They're no longer balanced. They have a pelvis or a whole system that is more facing forward, because this muscle is shortened, this muscle is lengthened, and now you've got a situation here where everything changes, where the person's whole back has to change, the whole dynamics of how their body moves changes, and that's simply because they've been in this position for too much of the day, and the body is not designed to be in a situation where the muscles change their natural length in comparison between, say, anterior, posterior. Okay, so now, as you can see, I'm in the sitting position, just to give you a visual idea of what I'm trying to tell you. Now, as you can see, the hip flexor is this muscle here that basically lifts the leg up. This is the hip flexor. In this position, this hip flexor is very shortened, and it becomes shortened if I remain in this position. On the other hand, the glute has to travel all the way from back here, all the way around, because my hip is facing, my upper body is facing forward and my legs are up. So what ends up happening is this muscle gets weak, this muscle gets very tight and very strong. Now, if I take that and I want to stand up, basically this movement becomes difficult, because now this muscle is short, and to stretch out, it becomes difficult. So now the difficulty you can imagine with runners in particular is that when they want to run, that leg needs to be able to swing right back. That leg needs to go right back, because of course if you want to run faster, you need to be able to generate stride length or an increased cadence. And in this case, if we want to generate stride length, we need a strong glute and we need a flexible hip flexor. And both of those things are hamstrung, so to speak, by sitting. And most of us sit too much in a day, whether it be in front of the TV, at our desk, or in the car. So these are activities that 99% of the population do way too much of, and therefore the muscle imbalance between anterior and posterior in particular, the other imbalances that occur as well, but those are the key ones, and those are the ones that we need to fight against. So in this particular example, if I had to say to you, stretching is good, and I went and stretched my glutes, it would make my situation even worse. So that conclusion would be false. I would have to say stretching is good if it's targeting the right areas based on where the imbalances are. And that is the point of stretching, is to rectify the imbalances and to get the range of motion that you need in order to do the activity that you want to do. As a physio, there's a test that I can do to tell whether a person's hip flexor is too short or whether they have an adequate length hip flexor. And interestingly, I found that every single athlete that I ever treated as a physio who had a sports injury from running or from triathlon or from cycling, every single one of them, bar none, had a positive Thomas test. And this is basically the Thomas test. If you grab a leg and pull it to your chest, sitting on the edge of the massage table or the plinth, and you basically roll back, if the anterior leg stays up, then the test is positive. The normal length of a muscle, the leg should go down. It should hang down to the horizontal. Any leg that sticks up means that this hip flexor is not flexible enough. Now, because that test is positive, it means that that leg is not able to swing back and not function as it should. And we need to counteract that. And I found that within 10 days of treatment, in basic treatment, conservative treatment with glute strengthening and hip flexor stretching, diligent stretching of the hip flexor and quadriceps, most of my sports injuries resolved by themselves without having to do any other interventions. Okay, so here I am on the bike, and you're wondering why I'm on the bike to describe stretching, and that's because for cyclists the same thing applies. The stretching, the hip flexor is the one muscle that becomes very, very tight and does predispose to injuries, and that is often why you see injuries such as ITB, iliotibial band friction syndrome, in a cyclist, is because of this very phenomenon where the hip flexor becomes short. Because if you look at my cycling here, the hip flexor never goes beyond neutral. If I have to stand up, you can see that's neutral. There my leg is in neutral. And it doesn't even go past neutral. It stays always in front of the body. It stays in a shortened position. And this muscle, having to lift the leg each time, this muscle becomes short. And because the glute is always on slight stretch, the glute doesn't quite make up for as much as the hip flexor. And you can see a lot of people cycle a lot with their quads as well. The quads and hip flexor become very, very strong. The glute becomes strong, but not strong enough to counteract those, especially because the range of motion is compromised. And that is why we need to be stretching hip flexor and quads. Okay, so to summarize the point of this video, most of us spend too much time sitting in front of the TV, sitting at our desks working, or sitting in the car driving. And these have consequences for our range of motion and therefore the function that our body has. And so the stretching is basically there to reverse the process of poor range of motion, increase our range of motion into the normal range, and to improve our function. To do that, we need to hold the stretch for at least 30 seconds so that muscle fibers adapt and actually become longer. And we need to aim for about 6 minutes a day if we're looking to improve our range of motion, and 3 minutes a day in total if we are looking to maintain our range of motion. So there are 3 basic exercises we can do: the hip flexor stretching, the calf stretching, and the lower back stretching. And all of those exercises can be done safely by 99% of the population, because 99% of us sit too much. Have a look at the exercises, and in the end, drop me a comment. try these exercises each day, and these exercises are appropriate for all of the population. These exercises will never replace going to visit a healthcare professional if you are injured, but it will definitely reduce your chance of injury, and it will definitely improve your range of motion safely and in a way that will add value to your performance, add value to your life, and keep you moving forward positively.